Abuse. There are many different forms of abuse, from mental to emotional to physical. Maybe you yourself have experienced abuse. Maybe you know a friend, a family member, or a neighbor that has been a victim or even a perpetrator of domestic abuse. The reality is that domestic violence and abuse can be seen worldwide and throughout society. And it's up to us to speak out against the perpetrators in order to protect the victims and see a change in the world. Hi, my name is Brooke Williams, and I'm going to be talking about domestic violence and abuse and ways that we can save the victims. I've done some research and I've read several articles in order to grasp a better understanding about domestic violence and abuse. And I wanted to gain a better understanding about why we need to take a stand in the first place. Domestic violence is something that pretty much all of us have heard at least once in our lives, but some of us might still not understand the severity of the words domestic violence. In an article called 10 Celebrities Who've Been Touched by Domestic Violence by Sarah Atchell, written in 2022, stated that various celebrities such as Halle Berry, Christina Aguilera, and Rihanna have been touched by domestic violence. This just goes to prove that any and anyone can be touched by domestic violence, even celebrities who might be thought of as untouchable. In another article written by the World Health Organization in March of 2021, found that 1 out of 3, or 30% of women, have been subject to physical and/or sexual abuse by a domestic partner, a non-partner sexual violence, or both. When looking at the world today, those numbers are staggering. If you're in a family and you have 3 sisters, then that means statistically that 1 out of 3 of you are going to be subject to domestic abuse. This needs to change. To add even more heart-wrenching truth to that fact is that a lot of domestic abuse victims don't speak up or talk about their abuse. So that means the numbers are even higher than what we think. In an article written by Adela Solomon in 2022, Rebecca Hitchens states that given the stigma and victim blaming, we know true prevalence in scales to be even greater as they cannot or feel able to disclose their experiences. With the count so high for domestic violence, one should understand the signs to notice that someone could be a victim of domestic abuse or violence and how to help them. In an article called Dating Violence and Domestic Violence, written by M. Pillar Matude of Journal of Adolescent Health, some problems associated with domestic violence are PTSD, depression, suicidal behavior, and emotional and social problems in children. While these signs may not always correlate to domestic abuse and violence cases, it's important to note that these signs might be a possible result of domestic violence or abuse. The reality is that breaking the cycle is really difficult and it's really hard to see from an outside perspective. So watching out for signs may not always lead to domestic abuse or violence, but in some cases it could result in saving somebody's life. In another article called Domestic Violence, written by Britta Canna by various editors, said that women who experience domestic abuse or violence often experience a diminishing sense of self-esteem, helplessness, depression, exaggerated feelings of imprisonment, and some even get manipulated to the point where they feel like they deserve the abuse. This is ridiculous and it has to change. Although it may seem like identifying the victims of abuse might be easy, that's not always the case. If you think that you know a victim or you suspect somebody of being a victim of domestic violence or abuse, try to take action, and that could be rewarding for you and the victim in the long run. There are groups who specifically help those who are victims of domestic abuse. In an article written by Britta Canna, a group such as the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence was formed to protect those who are victims of domestic violence. M. Pillar Matude, in their article, wrote how there are levels to protection, such as the primary prevention program for intimate partner violence must take place at a community level. the secondary prevention is needed for early detection and treatment of at-risk populations. Finally, the tertiary prevention should be available, including counseling and other healthcare services to victims. Contributing to these actions and watching for signs could help save somebody's life for somebody who needs to escape but doesn't have the means to do so. While domestic violence and abuse are large issues in the population today, together we could stand to make a difference. In conclusion, domestic violence is a problem today that is way too prominent and it needs to be eradicated. While this mission is hard and brutal, and the outcome of saving those who have suffered so immensely is so rewarding. Noticing signs such as increased depression, sense of imprisonment in a relationship, or suicidal behaviors once in a relationship can lead to helping a victim silently crying out for help. Organizations, acts, and preventative programs are just the start of helping victims. Domestic violence may be prominent around the world, but it is up to us to try and put an end and speak out against domestic violence and abuse. It is up to us, the friend, the family member, the neighbor, or the passerby, to help those who cannot speak up for themselves for fear of retribution. It is up to us to be an outlet for peace and an escape for imprisonment of those who are in pain and fear. If we can each do our part in helping victims of domestic violence, we can speak out and add even more soldiers to the overall army on the war of domestic violence and abuse to ensure that an innocent victim never has to suffer again. Thank you.